you do need transportation, but you don't need a Tesla.
Hmm.
You do need a roof over your head, but that does not mean that your dream home should become a nightmare of a mortgage.
Right.
You could view education as an investment going to college. That doesn't mean that you need to take out debt to be able to do that.
Hmm.
You've got to eat, but it doesn't mean you need to eat out. On today's episode of the FYI podcast, we are going to cover the 7 excuses that people make with money in their 20s. We're going to teach on how to be young and debtless.
It's one small step for man,
Neil Armstrong sets foot on the moon.
one giant leap for mankind.
Sometimes one small step can lead to a giant leap. If you have a call to change the world for Christ, GFA World invites you to their Ministry Apprenticeship Program. Take one small step. Log on to gfa.org/apprenticeship. Go to gfa.org/apprenticeship.
To get started, here's the verse of the day.
The verse of the day comes from Luke 16:10. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much.
Man,
Wow.
I remember being about 20 or so years old, getting promoted to be a manager at then Grand Slam, the part-time job that I had through high school and college, and didn't know that it was a test. But the owner was out of town. My friend, the general manager, and the other leader, they asked me to make the bank deposit. Pretty sure it was a Saturday, busy day. Like most of the business was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, weekend birthday parties. So I had to go to US Bank about a mile away, wait in line, hand off the deposit, and it was already filled up. Already filled out. I just needed to drop it off. Well, the amount on the deposit slip did not match the amount of cash that I was depositing. There was extra money.
Mhm.
And when I got back, they asked, "What are you doing with, or what'd you do? Like, did the deposit match up?" And I go, "No, there was extra." They're like, "Where is it?" And I'm like, "Well, I just had them change the deposit amount for the increase. You gave me the money. I did the job." And I think it was actually a test of integrity.
Well, because didn't the bank teller ask if you wanted the cash in your back in the bag or if you wanted to deposit it?
Yep.
And you did not want any cash on you or any room for
Nope.
error or integrity that was questioned. So,
And anytime I hear that verse of the day, that's what I think of. Like, can you be faithful with the little? Because maybe you feel like you only have a little right now. Maybe you've got a mix of some income. Maybe you've got some Venmo. Maybe you owe some car payments and money and you're renting or hoping for a mortgage. Maybe you've got a car payment or other things on your credit cards. We are going to unpack the 7 excuses that people make with money. Babe, start us off.
oh my gosh. Well, I think you should first of all share the statistics of how much money and debt that are accumulated between the 18 and 29 or 30-year-old to this
Okay.
day. Set the stage for it a little bit. How about that?
Okay, in America, 2024, Q4, like right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's September as we record this, and there is $69 billion in non-mortgage debt among the 18 to 29-year-olds. So if you average that out over the 55 million in that age range, you get $12,871 on average of non-mortgage debt. So basically you're talking car payment, credit card balance, and maybe some student loans. It could be a mix of those 3. It could be all. And that's just the average. Some people are debt-free.
Yeah.
Some people could be a 23-year-old millionaire. So there's a lot of people with a lot of debt to bring up that average.
Well, I'm even thinking like, what would that number be if a mortgage was included?
Oh my gosh.
Because if it's 69 billion
Yep.
without mortgages and homes that we can't afford, that
Yep.
we're living in,
Yep.
that are house poor, we only have a couple things of furniture that are actually half our house might be empty, right? Or we're subletting and trying to rent and try to make money. I would just be curious to see in addition to those two side by side. But when it comes to 7 excuses people make with money, these are things that we thought about. These are things that I felt like could be relevant for a majority of the people listening, that you might believe or fall into one of these 7 or maybe all of these 7, because I think if I'm honest, I probably believed in every single one of them at some point in my life, right?
And you've noticed that we're in a series on FYI where we're talking about the yeah buts of adulting.
I have a job and I know money. Yeah, but
And
I shouldn't have this sushi on my plate. Yeah, but it's a girls' night.
totally, totally. And I think of it even this way. You could look at money and life in a way that you do need transportation, but you don't need a Tesla.
hmm
You do need a roof over your head, but that does not mean that your dream home should become a nightmare of a mortgage.
Right.
You could view education as an investment going to college. That doesn't mean that you need to take out debt to be able to do that.
hmm
You've got to eat, but it doesn't mean you need to eat out.
Yeah.
You
It's
see
being
where we're
creative.
going with it? Yes.
Gritty with money, right?
Yes. And so take us to excuse number one.
Oh, excuse number one is I want it. Have you ever been there where you want something and you kind of want it now? There's no later in your mind or vocabulary, or I'll save up for it. It's just like, I want it. It's kind of like when this is strategically done at gas stations, at grocery stores,
The
the
impulse buy.
temptation of the impulse buy when your cart or your basket's already up on the register and there's the pack of gum that's $3. There's that pop that's probably $3 by now, or there's whatever's tempting you. Could be the magazines, could be the book, whatever. I think we can, if we have the I want it mentality, if you're anything like me, you could find your shopping cart of life filled with junk food of things that you may have wanted, but actually you didn't need.
Well,
So
have you heard this? How do you waste $5,000 a year?
I've never heard this. What is it?
It's by spending $13.70 per day on things that you don't need.
That'd
On
be a
wants.
Starbucks run.
Totally.
Oh, shoot.
$13.70 is like nothing.
Well, it's true, but when I got paid $7.50 an hour, that sounds like 2 hours of scrubbing toilets for $13.
Well, and so spin it on its head. Do you know how to save $5,000 a year?
Don't spend that $13.50 a day.
$13.70 a day. Save it,
$13.70.
invest it, don't spend it. And it all adds up.
It does.
So excuse number one is I want it.
hmm
What's the second excuse?
Ooh, I need it.
Okay. And so like, how do you define need? I think is what the listener, if I was listening to this podcast, which I do, by the way, every week, I either watch or listen, FYI, as a listener after we've had this conversation, but like, how do you differentiate between I actually need it versus I just want this?
Okay, I would define a need as something that at the end of the day, like you actually need it. A want is something you can live without. A need is probably something that is a necessity in my mind. Like
hmm
that's how I think about it now. Like I need it. You know, like I also think about when I had a car, it was a two-door little Toyota Paseo, two-door. I knew I was going to take a dump at any moment. And I was like, I need a new vehicle. Okay, I got a 1-year-old vehicle. I probably did not need that version of a vehicle, but I had the foresight in my mind of when I get married, this will have seats in the back. When I go kayaking, my kayak can go on the top. When I bike, my bike can go in the back or on the top. So you could have the justified need of having something new, or you can humble yourself and say, wow, in my season, needing to drive was a necessity because we didn't have buses and all those systems and everything. I would have had I don't know, hitch a ride from somebody else. But I think a need, some of you can live without and some of you can't. So you
Dead
need
on the money.
groceries.
Dead on the money. Like,
Right?
like when we talk to young adults, I think that where we even get the needs right, but we overspend on the needs.
Guilty.
that's-
That'd be the vehicle
Exactly.
demonstration
Well,
right there.
Thinking of one of our friends who has 10 kids, by the way, this is a family of 12.
hmm
And he told us last week, we were with him, he said that he's never spent more than $14,000 on a vehicle.
hmm
And he has it, by the way.
hmm
One of the nicest homes I've ever been into, multimillionaire for sure. And how has he gotten there
hmm
and achieved his giving goals and his generosity goals? He has a need for his family of transportation. They have a minivan and then a party bus van, as they call it. And they do need to get around, but it doesn't mean that they need a Tesla or or like look at this, just a brand new vehicle. And I see a lot of college students who they do need transportation, maybe to their internship, or they start commuting,
Mm-hmm.
or they're graduating, and all of a sudden they overspend on their need. And a used car would have done through Facebook Marketplace,
Just fine for the season
but
that you're
they
in,
end up
right?
getting a car payment that they didn't need. And so excuse number three is I have it. And this means like I have the money.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my hobbies is baseball cards.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I see a lot in this hobby is it's grown men with a childhood passion. And so because they have the money, they call it like there's this lingo in the sports card world where they're like, I finally have the adult paycheck. And so I'm going to spend on my childhood hobby and buy all the cards I wish I could have had as a kid. And so this is what the people make excuses with money because they have money.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, because I have it, I may as well spend it. And this is where things like paycheck to paycheck come along
Mm-hmm.
because they earned it and they're right. They made the money, but then they're spending the money and not investing, not saving, and not achieving the future goals that they have.
Yeah. And number four, I think I fall in this category as well. Maybe you can relate, or maybe you're in the season, is I deserve it. I deserve to go out and eat every single Friday night with my friends. I deserve to spend my money however I want because I've earned it. So I deserve to spend it however I wish. And I think the deserve mentality is very inward focused. It can be very selfish. It can be a wrong way of thinking when it comes to money because giving is part of money, saving, spending, living on the rest are all things that we've always talked about on this podcast. And I think when we get to the deserve it, it comes to a very, I don't know, it can be a very greedy season, right?
Greed, entitlement, envy, the idea
Entitlement,
that
that's a
like
good
I
word.
deserve it because God owes me. I've been hustling, I've been
Mm-hmm.
working overtime. Like I'm buying this because I deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you study the person of Jesus
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to follow his way, we're doing better than we deserve because we had a debt that he didn't owe and we couldn't pay.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus, even on the cross, paid a debt that he didn't owe because we had a debt that we couldn't pay. And I think that contentment and gratitude, even as I talk with non-Christian financial
Mm-hmm.
advisors and wealth managers, one of the messages and themes that they encourage young people with is be grateful for where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Find contentment. And man, one of the prayers that I've been praying lately is God, would you let my heart be glad in you?
Mm-hmm.
God, would you let me to be content?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean complacent, as Micah, as you've taught on, but man, I think that just having that contentment is key.
Well, I think also with I deserve it, it can look something like I've worked so hard this semester that I deserve to go on this beach trip or this
Spring
spring
break.
break trip with my friends. And you come back $1,500 in debt, not really realizing like, wow, was it worth it? The memories were worth it for sure, but my finances were not in a place of taking that hit at
Treat
that,
yourself.
yeah, in that season. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So what's the fifth one, Josiah?
I learned it. And we live in a day and an age where I'm going to say it, TikTok experts. You have no way of knowing if these guys and gals who give you advice on how many credit cards to open up and how to have all this money, and a lot of it, I'm just going to say, I think it's a get rich quick scheme. Proverbs, which was like the TikTok from Solomon, ancient wisdom.
Yep.
If he were here, what he would say is get rich quick schemes don't last.
Mm-hmm.
And so be careful who you're learning from about money.
Mm-hmm.
Even what we're sharing on the FYI podcast, open up this old book, this Bible. It'll lead to a new life. These
Mm-hmm.
old ancient truths are some of the best pieces of financial wisdom, of life wisdom, of marriage wisdom, relationship wisdom, how to work, how to have a flourishing life. And so you might feel like you learned it, but who did you learn it from?
And I would say, even though with like learning it, no matter how much you have learned, your head knowledge, is it matching up with your heart and your hands? Because you may know how to save, you may know how to give, you may know how to work hard on in some of those dynamics, but it's like, but what are you saving in and towards? Like, is there knowledge and wisdom in that? Who are you giving your money to? Like, is it 10% going to the church? And like, that's biblical. So it's like even understanding just those dynamics. Once you learn, it doesn't mean that you don't continue to learn along the way, because once you don't really arrive in the money world. I mean,
I know.
and if you think you did, even million and billionaires look at one more dollar,
Yeah, just a
one
little
more
bit
dollar,
more.
one more dollar.
You
So,
know, with the last thing on this fifth excuse that people make with money, there's 7 of them. We're on number 5, which
mhm,
is I learned it. You know, Dave Ramsey says this. He's a personal finance expert. We were just with their team in Nashville last week. And one of the things that he says in helping people pay off their debt and start building the future that, you know, they want and that God wants for them. One of the things he says is with money, it's 90% behavior, only 10% head knowledge.
I would
So
agree.
like you might have learned it, but are you just
Applying it.
exactly. Sixth
Oh,
excuse that people make with money.
is I earned it. I think that can say I work hard so I can spend it however I want. Like I earned this money. Don't tell me how I should spend it. Don't tell me how I should save it. Don't tell me. Like I know. And I think that's another form of entitlement or entitled thinking and behavioral things that can come out when it comes to the gift of money. Money is actually a gift and a tool used to help fund our dreams, not to hold us captive.
Man. And as Micah and I've gone from we were single young adults not that long ago, and now
Hmm.
in our 7 years or so of marriage, and we've got young kids, like one of the things that we want to use is open hands. And
Hmm.
to say this money does not belong to us, it's all God's at the end of the day. We came into this world naked, we're going to die naked. We can't have in our hearse someday where our body or corpse is, can't pull a U-Haul.
Hmm.
And you can't take any of the stuff with us. And so with it along the way is to be generous and to say that, hey, it's God's anyway. The last is I'll pay for it later. And I think in 2024, the swipe is the hype.
Hmm.
People are buying houses that they can't afford. They're foreclosing on it. They're $12,871 in non-mortgage debt.
On average,
And so
right?
people are clearly spending more than they have, more than they make, and thinking that they'll pay for it later. And
Yeah.
hopefully that works out for them.
Yeah. So I guess we just want to end with encouragement. This is not a condemnation of just like, this is the bad things about money, or these are the 7 things. But these are 7 things to be mindful of, because money is an amazing tool that can help, like I said, fund and fuel your dreams or fund and fuel somebody else's dreams. And you just get to be a part of that story. And God's given us a tool not to worship, not to idolize, not to run our lives, but to give us an opportunity to bless those around and be a blessing in the process. So if I honestly can relate to every single one of these, I'll pay for it later was a mentality I think I lived with paycheck to paycheck, because it was kind of demonstrated in my family in some ways and on some waves of really realizing like, wow, I get paid in 2 days and I already have my paycheck spent because I have this debt to pay. And it could be my school loan, it could have been a vehicle I was paying off. And to really realize that money is a gift, and how we steward it and how we utilize it and leverage it for God's kingdom will hopefully bring him glory. And I'll say, if you're wrestling and struggling with money, are you part of a local church that teaches something about finances? I know a lot of churches maybe don't talk about finances from the pulpit, but there's people that go through business plans. There's people that go through financial planning, not to the extent of like an advisor would do, but just the bare minimum basics that I think anybody can grasp and start applying when it comes to savings, when it comes to retirement, when it comes to giving, and just the concept and the biblical concept of money at large. So,
And would you do us a favor on Spotify? If you're streaming and on YouTube, type into the comments which of the 7 excuses have you made most often in your life. Micah, I know you said that it was I deserve it. And I think for me, I think I can have a tendency towards I need it. And I think it's really easy I'm a saver by nature. And so my excuse is probably overspending on some of the needs. Like I have no problem. I remember when we were dating, we would go out on dates and we like to try new restaurants. And one time, Micah, I paid for every date. And one time you were like, Josiah, we're eating out 2 to 3 times a week. Like you could be putting that money towards our future.
I
And
said that after we got married, though. I didn't say that in the moment to freak him out. But when you get the bill and it's like $20, $40 plus a tip, you're like, oh my gosh, take that times 3. I don't want him to spend $150 or even $75 a week on this, what I love to cook. And we can cook inside. We can go on a date and it could be a cheap date. Like dating doesn't have to be expensive. Living doesn't have to be expensive. Food doesn't have to be expensive. It's how you are going to invest in the memories attached to it and the conversation that's in it. And I don't know, you can get creative if you're in the dating world. You're like, wow, I'm trying to save for a ring. I'm trying to pay off my school. Like that might be you today. You're like, I want the wife, but I can't provide. I want the husband, but I don't see his finances where they need to be. These are things that you can start doing and taking inventory of now in your late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, because how you spend now is probably how you're going to spend later. If
true.
God can trust you with a little, he can trust you with a lot. But if you can only be trusted with a little, you might only stick with a little. And if that little does grow without God's blessing, it might be very fleeting. So we've talked to a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people who do very well, don't know how to manage their funding and finances, and go into bankruptcy and lose it all. And they do it and build it again, and they lose it all. Or they're spending it on things they didn't even know that they were investing in or spending their monies on. So know that every single dollar you have and earn has a place, has a right to be spent in a way. And are you monitoring that? Because if you're not monitoring that, then kind of flows in and kind of flows out. And when you look at your statements, I will say this, I am old school, but I remember when I would get my statements of my spending habits, I would panic looking at how much I spent at a credit card place. It was like, oh, the Pita Pit, $12, TJ Maxx, $34. Like those swipes add up so stinking fast. And at the end of it, you're like, wow, $354 on top of $700 rent, on top of gas, on top of internet and everything else. It adds up. So it's like when I say your swiping and your dollars all have a name and a place, you get to be a part of the story of that and story in life that you create and that you're cultivating now and the habits that you're cultivating now. So
It's
I don't know.
incredible.
That's all I got.
This is the FYI podcast.